Welcome to DFS Insights, your go-to channel for everything FanDuels. I am David Geislinger. This video will go over my 5-step process in entering a lineup into a FanDuel single game large field tournament. Before getting into these steps, let's go ahead and just break down the general format of the FanDuel single game slate. And make sure you stay tuned to the end of this video where I'm actually going to give you a bonus step that could change your thought process for these single game slates. So now, understanding the format. If you already know about FanDuel single game slates, feel free to go ahead and jump ahead to my first step. It's going to be timestamped in this description below. So first off, FanDuel single game format is my favorite variation of DFS. Unlike full roster lineups, or also known as like main slate, this format allows me to focus on the dynamics of one specific match and maximizing the points in that one game. And single game slate, FanDuel introduces a unique structure where you have one MVP slot and you actually have 4 flex positions. A flex position, you can have a quarterback, a running back, wide receiver, tight end, kicker, or defense in those slots, and even in the MVP slots, you can have those same positions there. You are limited to 4 players from one team, and you have to have one player from another team. The MVP position is a crucial position, obviously, in this because you'll earn 1.5 times the raw fantasy points of the player that you have in that position. So that is, putting the correct player in that position is a critical decision, and that's what's going to make you, the big money. Can you get money without, getting the MVP position correct? Yes, but you're not going to win, that bigger money. This is different than, the NFL Showdown over on DraftKings, and even the FanDuel NBA single game slates, which, in all honesty, I wish that NFL did the same, structure as the NBA single game slates, where they had an MVP at 2 times, a 1.5 and a 1.2 times, because this would help actually get rid of some of the duplicate lineups that you see in these large tournaments, and just add a little bit more variance to it. And over on for the NFL Showdown, you select a captain who does get you the 1.5 times the points, but it also costs 1.5 times the salary, which is completely different because you might not want to select the highest value player to go in that position, because that will exponentially increase the salary of that player, and then you're limited to the players that you select to fill out your roster. Whereas in FanDuel's, just a single game, you just get the multiplier, you don't get the salary multiplier. So now that we understand, what these single game FanDuel tournaments, the format is, let's go ahead and, get over to my list, what you guys are actually here for. First on my list is basically understanding my bankroll. Knowing how I'm going to spend my bankroll correctly is going to help me with the volatility of these large field tournaments. I typically like to split up my bankroll into 2 different DFS approaches. Like 80% of my bankroll, I'll be entering it into cash games, heads up, 50-50s, and even these single game tournaments, which basically you have a little bit better odds of winning, placing in the money there. So that basically leaves me with 20% of my bankroll that I plan on utilizing to enter into these large tournaments. I do this because there is a high probability that you're not going to win in these tournaments. So to me, dumping my entire bankroll into these large fields is a risky move, and I like to maintain that bankroll, of basically that house money, as you would say, if in gambling terms, use the house money, and then I didn't like the the feeling of this week spending all my money and then going to the ATM, putting more money in for the next week and the next week and the next week. So, being able, it took me a while to realize, and understand, the bankroll utilization management part of it. It might not seem like a big step, but it is a big step, for at least me. So this way, I'm always playing with, basically house money. There are times where, all your lineups, just you picked wrong, and then you do got to go, take the hit and go get more money. But for the most part, splitting it about 80-20 seems to be good for at least me. You might be in a situation you might want to do, maybe 90-10, just to get your bankroll up a little bit. But definitely bankroll to me, always the first. I always look at, how much I'm willing to spend on these matchups, and then, separating it based on that. Now that, basically going on to step 2 here, after I know what my bankroll is, I can go ahead and start getting into the game matchup and break down. FanDuel's offer single game tournaments basically for every game, but these large prizes that typically are what people are eyeing are usually on the primetime matchups. Thursday night, Monday night, and Sunday night football matches. These tournaments typically are 40 to 60,000 entries, 150 max entry tournaments. I look at these matchups and I basically see what game I feel more comfortable with. I will choose games that I already know kind of the most information about, and sometimes it might not even be these 40 to 60,000 if a game's in the afternoon slate and I feel like I can do that. I'll pick obviously the higher of the tournaments in that particular lineup, but it might not be that 100K 2-first tournament, but it'll be the large field of that specific slate. And I'll choose the games that I'll know the most information, so I already kind of go into that game with an edge. I feel I have the edge. So this sometimes being on the West Coast, I'm on the West Coast. So those are the games that I get to see live, televised, and not those glimpses in time with Red Zone or whatever. So I get more exposure to them. Also, being a Green Bay Packer fan, I follow that team, down to who's running back 3, who's on who just came up from the practice squad. So those are the matchups I'm looking for, going in with already an edge, or you feel like you already have an edge on that field. So once I just decide what games I'm doing, I'll break those games down into offense, defenses, recent performance, start gathering information, everything from passing yards to rushing to how many times the quarterback was sacked, how many times did the defense, what did the defense do. Everything's going to help benefit you in the lineup construction, which actually we'll be talking about later on in this video. While the entire season stats are helpful, I typically like to look, obviously I look at the entire season, but I also like to look at like the previous 3 games to kind of give me a more accurate glimpse in time into how that player is performing, the most recent, kind of not necessarily tunnel vision, but just looking at that most recent performance, because things change. If it's week 14 and is he really the same as he is in week 1, week 2? It might not be. So that's why I typically like to focus on the 3 previous matchups. Also, keep in mind, you got to keep things into consideration, such as like external factors, such as the weather conditions, or are these teams doing a short week turnaround? They play on Sunday and now they're playing on Thursday. All these things could, potentially affect, the game. As the season progresses, the team records start, becoming a lot more important. Are these teams competing for a playoff spot, the bye week? Or, hey, are they so far out of it, they're prepping for next year, so now, wide receiver 4s and 5s are getting a little bit more snap count because the team wants to see how they do. Is the QB2 coming in? So everything comes into play when breaking down these games. Every stat you can think of, it's incredible on how much data and everything is out there. So all this resources and all this data and all these this analysis is great. However, it's only as good as my third understanding that my third step which is the sources that I get, that you get, or I get the information from. So step 3, sources. Are you using just one website for all your information? How do you know that information is accurate? Who is generating this information? Is it does this person have a bias, or there's so many different things. So I like to use several different sources of information, because I kind of just want that overall collaboration of ideas, thoughts, data, and then that way I can come up with my own conclusions. This is not only helpful with to make my lineups unique, but it also helps me understand the process of data gathering. Okay, this person might see the matchup this way, this person might see it this way, I see it this way. Why is it different? Oh, okay, I can understand that view, I can understand this view, and that's great. All that information and all those details are going to help you with your lineup construction. Injury news, huge. Injuries are can make or break your lineup. Typically what I do is you look on Twitter or X or whatever they call it now, and you find reporters that report on team specifics. Their sole job is to basically report every detail on that team, and they typically get that information pretty quick, even before your main platforms, your main websites that you might be using. So they're always follow them, just so you can get up-to-date information, like, hey, dude might be coming down with a cold, or he was at the club last night, or so many different things, right? And hopefully you can use that information to your lineup, because I sure do, especially injury. Next, kind of going on the information / website portion of this is my view on optimizers on these websites. I think the optimizers are great, but I kind of you got to realize what they are. They're just tools, and you should probably treat them as such. I've used plenty of optimizers from several different sites, tried them out, and to me they basically are all the same. They all use the projections, the general projections of the sites, the ownership projections, and you tweak a few things here and there, and it just spits out a lineup. You kind of don't really fully understand what's going on unless you really get down into it, which it seems to be kind of hard to really get into these optimizers, because they only let you do so much adjusting, and if you don't really do any adjusting, it's basically just spitting out lineups that are the most projected fantasy points, which you can do anyways if you just had the fantasy points projection numbers anyways by yourself. So I quit using them. I got rid of the pace, the site's optimizer. I didn't really feel like I had full control over all the settings. And now I see some websites doing sims, which I find kind of funny. I'm genuinely curious on how they are simming lineups against each other and coming up with data that this lineup would be better than this lineup, because what game script are they using to generate those projections? What settings were used? I just have too many questions. It just seems really weird to me. I did create my own optimizer. By no means is it even comparable to how user friendly, the websites are, but I know I can adjust every setting on there to my liking. I'm still, fine tuning and adjusting it, tweaking it every game, every matchup. Is this right? This right? And it seems to be doing okay. And obviously, there's times where it does great, other times it does terrible. And that's the process. Just tweaking it here and there, looking at other stats that I could possibly include. I include things from, obviously, if the wide receiver is, what's the cornerback he's going against, what's his, defensive rating. I put that in there. The weather I include. Home field advantage, do I consider that, things of that nature. So basically once, I feel like I've broken down that game as much as I possibly can, I start looking into, my next step. Basically, step 4, we call it basically how I'm going to look at the game, how it's going to play out. This is called game scripting. Basically, you kind of got to already have in your head like how the game's playing out. I come to, if I come to the conclusion that a team's going to be exceptional at the run, and they're going against an opponent that's weak against the run, well, my game script's going to basically have Team X, run heavy, so obviously focusing on a running back in this situation. This also, keep in mind, increases their amount of time of possession. The clock's going to continue to run. It might be a lower scoring game because they're running it so much. Like I said, the clock's moving. Or going to a pass happy team, that might be a higher scoring team. So you need to think of each stage of the game. What team will be, will Team X be leading Team Y? By how much? And will this cause, Team Y to no longer be, running the ball because they're down by so much? Now they're passing it more. Will Team X blow out Team Y? Is it such a blowout where starters are now sitting and, the backup QB comes in? I mean, typically that's later on in the game. And you don't really have to worry about that, but it's like maybe for like a quarterback, but maybe that's where a value player can all of a sudden make or break a lineup. Game scripting is huge. It's a huge part of your lineup construction. I typically like to do 2 or 3 game scripts basically per game. I'd say I'll look at the game script I've come up with, and I'll base how many entries I'm going to do on each kind of game script. So I'll just do an example here. If I had 4 game scripts doing 100 lineups, now am I doing is it a 40 40 30 40 40 15 5, sorry, bad math, lineups out there, based on the game scripts. If it's going to be a blowout, how many lineups am I going to do based on the blowout? How many lineups am I going to do that Team X is winning? How many lineups that Team Y is winning? So knowing the game script, and once you have that in the game script, and you feel comfortable with all the knowledge and all the information and everything, now we can finally get to step 5 in my process, which you've probably all been waiting for, is actually handcrafting your lineup. Getting to this part, it takes time. Very rarely do I do lineup construction just going, signing into Fanduel, click, 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 boom, click, 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 boom. No, I mean, I exhaustively go over those previous 4 steps. I mean, I'm probably long-winded explanation of them all, and it probably might not benefit you guys, but that's what I do. I make sure before I get to this step that I have literally absolutely nothing left based on my time. So I do have, unfortunately, limited time. I wish I can get to the point where I have unlimited time to research, but maybe in the near future. when it comes, down to selecting, the players for the FanDuel lineups, my key is balance. I definitely like to have, those star players who I know are going to deliver those big performances, and basically they're going to be the ones that hold down, anchor my lineup basically. But where I try to focus mainly on, and here's I think obviously the real magic where people is when you find those undervalued players, under the radar, those hidden gems, and and you have them, and they have that breakout game. That's what you need to win typically these large field tournaments, is that low owned, low salary player to just, for whatever reason, he's looking good that night, he got a few extra snaps, he's catching whatever that player did, he exceeded exceeded expectations, and he got way above what he was projected to do. So that's finding that talent, that whether it's the player's a favorable matchup, or you scripted that the blowout happened and you had this wide receiver 5, you're sitting there and he ended up getting a touchdown, and he was a 5,000 salary player. That's huge. That's not only is he low owned, that allowed you to put higher players, the higher salary players in, because he's only 5,000. But just keep in mind, there is always a perfect mix, perfect balance. I'm going to go ahead and kind of share a strategy. What I typically do here. I like to start by identifying one or two of the star players who I think are going to have that standout performance. These are going to be, basically, like I said, the foundation of my lineups. And then I'm going to spend most of my time looking, at the 8K and below players. Who's going to have that breakout players? Who am I going to, focus on? How am I going to set my lineup apart? Now, one way to set your lineup apart, ownership. Ownership is huge in these large player pools. Huge, hands down, probably the most viable piece of information that you'll find on one of these paid websites is the ownership projections. Even though it is, just a projection, it is also giving you valuable insight of where people are looking at players, right? Like where the majority of people are focused, and they're typically, for the most part, NFL is, I think, pretty locked down as far as generating projections for. There's not too much unknown out there. For the most part, they're fairly accurate. Some obviously more accurate than the others, but to me, I use a website that I found to be fairly accurate with these projections. I just don't have the time nor the resources right currently to generate my own ownership projections. So use that information. I guess that would be, to help you determine, you've got to have that low owned potential player, and he's got to have that breakout game. And like I said, that's typically those players, under 8K. So, just remember, don't follow the crowd. Make strategic choices in your lineups. Consider, every factor when doing it. Look for those hidden gems. And good luck, in these large field GPPs. Hopefully these 5 steps, my 5 steps have helped. Maybe, you weren't looking at, one of them. I'm not saying you have to follow it. I'm not saying by any means is this going to guarantee victories, but this is just how I do things. Now, like I did mention before, since you did stick around to see, I'm going to give you my 6th step here. And I don't know necessarily it's a step, but it's, it's called expectations. The expectations of these large, DFS really in general. This is gambling Just like any other form of gambling, you have the potential to lose. So knowing what to expect, especially with these large field GPP tournaments, can help mitigate maybe some financial impact. Please don't chase losses. I'll echo it like what everybody else says. For me, wins come in spurts. It seems like I'll be doing great maybe a month or so, and then it's just I'll have a down stretch, and then I'll come back, and it's DFS. It's it's fun. It also provides a form of entertainment when they're watching the game too. But the potential to win money it's great too. But I'll just break it down into numbers for you. Since my background is really with engineering numbers, I like to put kind of values on things. So put it into perspective, a typical large field tournament in these single games, 40 to 60,000 as previously mentioned. So let's just go ahead and assume 60,000. Typically these entries are $9 a piece, and you can enter in up to 150 of these lineups. So let's just go ahead. The odds that you getting first place with one entry with 60,000 players is 0.0017%. Now you're probably saying, hey, but you mentioned 150. I can enter 150 lineups to better my odds. I agree, 100%. But your odds go from 0.0017 to 0.25. You have a 1/4% chance basically to win a 60,000 player pool with 150 lineups to get first place. So, and keep in mind, only the top 23 to 25% of entries actually walk away with cash prizes. This is typically double the money. And that's based on how many lineups are duped and things like that. So I'm just not trying to freak anybody out or worry anybody, but just keep your expectation where they're at on these large field tournaments. Also keep in mind that these larger fields are typically filled with pros that are literally this is their job, is to do DFS, and I might have more time than the average person, 2-3 times, but these players have 10-15 times the time and the resources to research. So you're going against 150 of their lineups, which are probably going to take up quite a bit of that winning. So but keep it as long as you understand and you have the expectations, keep playing. And I hope you guys did enjoy this step-by-step guide. I didn't want to kind of end it on a bum note there, but just want to keep everything in perspective there. So I'm hoping this helps you guys in the future wins. Go, if you did like the video, go ahead, please make sure you do like it, give it a thumbs up. Put in the comments too, what do you guys think? Do you agree with any of my steps? Did any of my steps I've heard this before, it's not working? Or or also mention other topics you want me to cover. My co-host and cousin David Grant Jr. He's going to be doing his lineup video here probably in the next week, coming up here. So his strategy is going to be different than mine. He's been doing it a lot longer, so I'll definitely be watching that, and maybe if I see something that I can improve on, and always be willing to adjust. Like, I know my strategy, doesn't always win, and I'm always looking for ways to improve. Don't be afraid to change it up. So with that, everybody, good luck in those future tournaments. Hope to see you up there on the leaderboards.